Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and it's time for Patron Week, where I show my undying gratitude to those who go above and beyond to help keep this channel going. This month, we're going to be touching on one of the few archetypes to be considered Tier 0. In the lore, they're practitioners of forbidden rituals, adapted to fight a vicious foe that corrupts the world around them. In paper, they push the ritual mechanic to and beyond the breaking point, turning light blue cards from Hungry Burger memes to competitive apex predators. Hit after hit on the Forbidden and Limited list were levied against them, so many in fact that it felt like the deck could never be stopped, until they've settled on where they are now, a shadow of what they once were, progenitors of things like Shinobirds and Drytron. So today, we pay homage to these frostbitten trailblazers. Let's see what cards we can chip out of the ice, bring to life these ancient rites, then see if we can find any support that reflects our values. It's time to tailor the game plan around Nekroz. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our duel runners. Our next stop is 40k, which means Leo and Luna Explained, where we'll be covering Ancient Fairy Dragon's companions, the Power Tool Dragons, Morphtronics, and any other cards that are more than meets the eye. Also, check out my Discord, where I must remind everyone that Delilah has threatened my life in fictional canon, but not real-life canon. Just want to make that clear. And my Twitch, where you can watch me put all my lessons to the test live with viewer duels. And if you want to go that extra mile, join my Patreon, where you can get my videos early and help us reach these video milestones. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Nekroz? Well, they're a series of mostly water attribute monsters, some effect, some ritual. Each half has their own similarities and roles, so we'll have to cover them in separate sections. But one thing is always true. Everything they do, it synergizes and enhances with ritual summoning. In the lore, all the members of the effect part of the theme are members of previous archetypes, coming from various eras of the Ice Barrier and Gishki themes, with the rituals being the same characters, donning armor made of previous powerful synchro monsters in the dual terminal lore's past, creatures who are long since past, given new form. In fact, the name itself is meant to be a combination of necro and cloth. So while the Nekroz are one of the protagonists, just remember that they go around wearing skin suits. And if that doesn't get you in the All Hallows Eve spirit, I don't know what will. Let's start with the orange monsters, and Shurit, Strategist of the Nekroz, is a pretty good first card. They're a level 3 warrior monster with 300 attack and 1800 defense, and if you ritual summon exactly one Nekroz ritual monster with a card effect that requires the use of monsters, this card can be used as the entire requirement. If this card is tributed by a card effect, you can add a warrior Nekroz ritual monster from your deck to your hand. We'll see a lot of this moving forward, effects that trigger when tributed by a card effect, something that lines up very well with ritual summoning. It might seem a little late to get a ritual monster after you've been used as ritual material, but trust me, it works out very well for us. Being used as the entire material for a Nekroz ritual summon is also a huge deal, as a lot of them, especially our good ones, are both high level and have restrictions that normally keep you from using a single monster to fulfill the entire requirements. This card was so good, in fact, it was limited almost as soon as it came out, was banned shortly thereafter, and stayed that way for years before finally coming back to 3 near the end of 2019. But hey, the best way to get people to stop viewing you as a threat is to stay out of the limelight for a while, so that's a pretty good strategy. Ariel, Priestess of the Nekroz, is a level 4 psychic monster with 1000 attack and 1800 defense, and once per turn you can reveal any number of Nekroz cards in your hand to either increase or reduce this card's level by the number of cards revealed until the end of this turn. And if this card is tributed by a card effect, you can add a Nekroz monster from your deck to your hand, except a ritual monster. So this can turn into any of your other effect monsters to line up a needed effect, and you can manipulate Ariel's level to help accomplish those ritual summons. Decreasing levels might seem weird, but when it comes to accommodating for levels, it does come in handy. Also, it doesn't specify it can't be used as material for any kind of summon, so while this card can already help you make a mean Abyss Dweller in the water deck, by going down a level, Leviair is now on the table, and we are gonna banish a lot. And they've got the classic Alistair stat line, meaning nothing bad is liable to ever happen to him. Dance Princess of the Nekroz is a level 4 spellcaster monster with 1600 attack and 800 defense, and while on the field, your opponent can't activate cards or effects in response to the activation of a Nekroz ritual spell card. And Nekroz ritual monsters you control can't be targeted by an opponent's card effect. If this card is tributed by a card effect, you can target one of your banished Nekroz monsters, accept a copy of this card, and add it to your hand. And no, that's not a typo on our end, that's an issue on Konami's end. And they had a reprint to fix this too, so I don't know what to tell you. It's still even like this in the official database, for crying out loud, so by all accounts that last effect shouldn't actually work. But operating on the assumption that it does, it's a pretty cool way to get back banished material to complete the cycle. And while on the field, it provides some pretty cool protection. But be careful about that wording. It provides targeting protection, very nice, and keeps your opponent from responding to the activation of Nekroz ritual spell cards. So their grave effects will still be fair game for your opponent to mess with. But it's hard to look away when you see that dance, water dance. Great Sorcerer of the Nekroz is a level 4 spellcaster monster with 1500 attack and 800 defense, and if this card is tributed by a card effect, you can add a spellcaster Nekroz ritual monster from your deck to your hand. And if this card is banished, you can send a Nekroz monster from your deck to the grave. But you can only use one effect per turn and only once per turn. Being able to scoop up your spellcaster rituals is very good and actually combos fairly well with its banishing effect. Not only will you set up other Nekroz monsters to be banished, one of our spellcaster rituals has a way of snapping up cards from your grave. So they're a good sorcerer, not quite sure if I call him a great sorcerer. Egza, Enforcer of the Nekroz, is a level 5 dragon monster with 2000 attack and 1000 defense, and if this card is tributed by a card effect, you can add a dragon Nekroz ritual monster from your deck to your hand. And if this card is banished, you can target one of your banished Nekroz monsters, except this card, and special summon that monster. And you can only use one of these effects per turn, and only once per turn. Since the dragon rituals don't have a deep amount of utility, Egza doesn't see a lot of play in turn, especially on top of the fact that 5 levels are harder to use as a monster. And having more levels in our deck isn't exactly a plus for ritual summoning. And while, in the context of being ritual material, adding to hand is basically the same as special summoning, you can't even use the effect to revive properly summoned ritual monsters because they all have a clause that make it so you can only ritual summon them. But it does recycle our effect monsters, meaning we can potentially use their on tribute and on banish effects again, and sorry, I get all emotional when these little goobers grow up, I can't stand it. Zephyr Saber, we're actually gonna have to cover some Zephyr cards here since they overlap with a ton of archetypes. Zephyr Saber, Swordmaster of the Nekroz, is a level 4 spellcaster pendulum monster with 1500 attack and 800 defense with a scale of 1. As a pendulum scale, you can't pendulum summon monsters except Nekroz and Zephyr monsters, an effect that can't be negated. As a monster, you can tribute this card from your hand or face up on your field to tribute monsters from your hand or field, then ritual summon a Nekroz ritual monster from your hand whose levels exactly equal the total levels of those monsters. That makes Saber here the secret 4th Nekroz ritual spell. It doesn't have any special grave effects, but as a monster, it helps bypass spell negation or prevention, including the dreaded anti-spell fragrance. If you think that card's bad now, trust me, it's been that way for a long, long time. Other than that though, we really aren't thrilled to have pendulum summoning in the deck, as you can't do that to rituals in your hand. Well, most rituals. But the pendulum restriction already deals with that one. But with how unique this is to the theme, that does make Zephyr Saber this deck's X Factor. Zefraxa, Flame Beast of the Nekroz, is a level 5 fire dragon monster, that's new, with 2000 attack and 1000 defense with a scale of 7. They have the same pendulum effect as Zephyr Saber, and as a monster, while this card is in your hand or grave, if any number of Nekroz or Zephyr cards, except copies of this card, are destroyed by battle or card effect while in the monster zone or pendulum zone, you can special summon this card. This is a card that's a lot more Zephyr than Nekroz, I'll tell you that. Sure, your opponent could destroy your card and you can get a float, but it doesn't really do anything else. It doesn't even line up with our generic water support we'd be playing. Like, there's times when being on fire is good, and others when it's not so good. And then of course, when you're actually on fire, that's the worst. Okay, normally I'd go into the ritual monsters here, but I think an understanding of what the ritual spells can do will help complement what our true blues can do. And a big part of what makes them so good is that they all share one effect. If you control no monsters, you can banish this card and a Nekroz monster from your grave to add a Nekroz spell from your deck to your hand. The ritual summoning effect is once per turn, but the searching is not. However, the only Nekroz spells are ritual spells, though this could change in the future, so keep that in mind. So you'll effectively be tutoring out another way to get to your ritual monsters. It'll trigger the banishing effect of your Nekroz effect monsters too, gaining an extra little bit of advantage along the way. And while ritual summoning a monster would make it so you have a monster on field and thus shutting off this effect, if you have 3 of these mirrors in your grave, nothing's stopping you from using all 3 of them before you summon a monster. Basically, once the advantage train gets rolling, you can set up whatever effects you need whenever it's most effective. Nekroz Mirror can be used to ritual summon any Nekroz ritual monster. You tribute monsters from your hand or field, and or banish Nekroz monsters from your grave, then ritual summon a Nekroz ritual monster from your hand, whose levels exactly equal the total levels of those monsters. So, as far as ritual spells go, it's one that helps you cheat costs by banishing monsters from your grave. Nowadays, that's a pretty standard, but it does set up the precedence that you need to make sure your levels all match up, like a synchro summon. So you're gonna have to flex that clear mind a bit. Though on that subject, can you imagine what a Yu-Gi-Oh series would be like if rituals was the headlining mechanic of the series? I've also heard that out of all spells in the game, this one is the most skillful to use. You know, cause it's the Nekroz Mirror. Nekroz Kaleidoscope tributes only a single monster from your hand or field, or you send a monster from your extra deck to the grave. Also after that, ritual summon any number of Nekroz monsters whose total levels equal exactly the level of that monster sent. So that makes it like a reverse ritual summon, getting you multiple summons off a single spell. Though, since it has to be exact, it can be a little tough to line things up. It's also the reason why you'd see some random high-leveled monsters in the extra deck in these lists, despite having nothing to do with Nekroz, just in case you can make the levels work out. But more often than not, you are sending Herald of the Archetype to get a little extra value out of the effect. It was a match made in heaven, and it's what happens when conventional advantage and unique card design collide. A scope. Nekroz Cycle tributes monsters from your hand or grave, then you can ritual summon a Nekroz ritual monster from your hand or grave, whose levels exactly equal the total levels of those monsters. That's right, Meteornus Drytron has an older sibling and it's just about as annoying. I'm tipping my hand here a bit, but one of the things that make Nekroz so good is that they have effects in the hand, so they're not just gigantic bricks, and those effects discard them. So with Cycle, it's like it doesn't even matter because the grave is just as valid a place to summon from as from the hand. Basically, you can discard your rituals to start your game plan, then circle back to them later. Alright, we've covered the ingredients, reviewed the recipes, now it's time to talk about the desserts, the ritual monsters, usually the brickiest part of any ritual deck, but are now essential combo pieces because they have effects that can be activated in the hand by discarding them, thereby circumventing one of the biggest weaknesses of these kinds of decks. They also have to be ritual summoned no matter what, so even if they're properly summoned, you can't use Monster Reborn or any similar effect to bring them back, with their ritual requirements getting steadily more strict as they increase in level. Another thing you'll notice is that they really hate the extra deck, as a lot of them have effects that interact with monsters summoned from there with devastating consequences. A good example of this is Nekroz of Clausulus, a level 3 warrior monster with 1200 attack and 2300 defense, and you can discard this card to add a Nekroz spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. And as a quick effect, while on the field, you can target a face-up monster on the field that was special summoned from the extra deck, and until the end of this turn, that target's attack becomes 0, also their effects are negated. This card was, to put it lightly, a menace. Not only would you need 2 extra deck monsters with effects and or attacks powerful enough to overcome a 2300 defensive wall, because you sure as heck weren't normal summoning anything that got over this, its level 3 status lined up very well with Jin, Releaser of Rituals, which just casually tacked on Vanity's Ruler's effect to keep your opponent off special summoning. Period. And that's not all. Because this is your ritual spell searcher, you can discard Clausulus to search for Cycle, which can ritual summon that card right back out of your grave. It's also the most memeable out of the entire cast, as it's a ritual trap card searcher with no targets. Technically, it's good future-proofing, but if you haven't printed it in 7 years, then when are ya? Nekroz of Unicorn is a level 4 spellcaster with 2300 attack and 1000 defense, and can be discarded from the hand to target a Nekroz card in your grave and add it to your hand. And while on the field, the effects of all monsters on the field special summoned from the extra deck are negated. Yeah, so it wasn't enough to just have a monster that negated single monsters, now we have a whole skill drain. Unicorn is in a similar boat to Clausulus, as you can pitch it to recover a ritual spell from the grave, so you can cycle it back onto the board. But you can also get really good material monsters like Shrit to make your summons easier. And if you thought the negation precluded you from making use of the extra deck, then you're dead wrong, because as a level 4 monster, this is easily folded into an Xyz, which ends up turning off that negate. Then, when you're all done, just ritual summon Unicorn back to set up that dampening field all over again. So this is less of the wish-granting Unicorn, and more of the cabin in the woods Unicorn. Nekroz of Catastor is a level 5 dragon with 2200 attack and 1200 defense, and must be ritual summoned without using another copy of Nekroz of Catastor. You can discard this card to target a Nekroz monster in your grave and special summon it, which would be a lot better if you could use this to revive your ritual monsters. But getting back Shrit is, of course, still pretty good. And at the start of the damage step, if a Nekroz monster you control battles an opponent's face-up monster that was special summoned from the extra deck, you can destroy that monster. So, like its namesake, it can just automatically win battles, this time with extra deck summoned monsters instead of non-darks. But this effect applies if any Nekroz battles, not just this one. The effect still comes from Catastor, but despite its low stats, you could throw Clausulus at a monster, and Catastor will make sure it bites the dust. Just hope they washed those things before Exa started using them. Last time we saw them, they were caked in evil swarm gunk, and by that point in the story, we'd seen enough good guys get possessed by evil forces, thank you very much. Nekroz of Brionac is a level 6 warrior monster with 2300 attack and 1400 defense, and must be ritual summoned without using any copies of Nekroz of Brionac. You can discard this card to add a Nekroz monster from your deck to your hand, except a copy of itself, and while on the field, you can target up to 2 face-up monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck, and shuffle them into the deck. So they are gone. You might think this would bounce to hand like base Brionac, but no. This card wants to make sure pendulums are dealt with too, so they go far, far away. And what gets me here is that because this can search monsters, it can grab Clausulus, which means finding your ritual spells is almost never an issue. This is a phenomenal going second board breaker that can deal with multiple threats all at once, all while massively increasing the consistency of your deck. Also, since it's channeling the spirit of an ice barrier dragon, that technically makes this a dragoon, so I instantly love them. Just ignore the fact that Brionac is actually a sea serpent. Nekroz of Gungnir is a level 7 spellcaster with 2500 attack and 1700 defense, and must be ritual summoned without using any level 7 monsters, something that really sucks when all your ritual spells want the levels to match exactly. During either player's turn, you can discard this card, then target a Nekroz monster you control, and it can't be destroyed by battle or card effect that turn. And during either player's turn, when this card is on the field, you can discard a Nekroz card, then target a card on the field, and destroy it. This card was used pretty sparingly on release as it wasn't a huge blowout, but it did have its usages. In hand, it could keep your Clausulus safe from being dealt with by battle or the errant removal effect, helping to maintain your control on the board. And because you could use it on Clausulus, you could also use it on other monsters as needed. And as a monster, not only did it have a pretty good stat line, it also had repeatable removal that could be used during either player's turn that wasn't locked to only affecting extra deck summoned monsters, though the discard cost could be detrimental. So all in all, it's a niche member of the theme that was useful in certain corner cases. A very flavorful move considering Gungnir was always the odd one out of the 3 Ice Barrier dragons. Nekroz of Valkyris is a level 8 spellcaster with 2900 attack and 1700 defense, and must be ritual summoned without using any level 8 monsters. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can banish a Nekroz card from your grave and discard this card to negate the attack, then end the battle phase. And during your main phase, while this card is on the field, you can tribute 2 monsters from your hand and or field, and if you do, draw the same number of cards you tributed. Now, if there was any card that determined this deck's tier 0 status, I'd say it was Valkyris. They'd certainly be tier 1 without it, but this pushes them way over the top. Because of Valkyris, Nekroz could spend whole turns committing basically nothing to the board, spending their time lining up the perfect 6-card hand, content with the knowledge that any attack from their opponent would be instantly thwarted, especially because this was in a time before Called by the Grave, so counterplay was very difficult to come by. And no one wanted to play into it either because Nekroz were really good at punishing you on the crackback. Combined with a powerful draw effect that could ditch monsters without usefulness, all while triggering any on-tribute effects of your effect monsters because that tribute is not cost, and you have a potent mix of abilities that may not be the flashiest, but gave you amazing control over the tempo of a game, ensuring your dominance of the board wasn't just a battle phase. Nekroz of Trishula is a level 9 warrior monster with 2700 attack and 2000 defense, and must be ritual summoned without using any level 9 monsters. When a card or effect is activated that targets any number of Nekroz monsters you control as a quick effect, you can discard this card to negate the activation. And when this card is ritual summoned, you can banish exactly 3 of your opponent's cards, 1 each from their field, grave, and randomly from their hand. Valkyris may have been what made Nekroz as powerful as they were, but Trishula was what made the deck feared. The second anyone met the conditions of having a card in each of the listed zones, it was only a matter of time before the most powerful of the Ice Dragon armors descended to tear apart just about any plan of action. The Graveyard Banish was particularly savage, as this was a format where Shaddolls, Burning Abyss, and Satellar Knight were running wild, and they loved using the grave as a secondary resource. And after that point, it stuck around on the field as a 2700 beater that could apply a ton of pressure. And while in the hand, it was a negate to keep your board safe, making you even more resistant to interaction. It would have been a bit better if you didn't have to banish from all 3 zones, but I guess Trishula here is a strict adherent to the rule of 3s. Nekroz of Ariad Bear is a level 10 warrior monster with 3300 attack and 3200 defense, and must be ritual summoned without using any level 10 monsters. While in the hand, you can discard this card to tribute up to 2 Nekroz monsters from your hand and or field, and if you do, send that many Nekroz cards from your deck to the grave. And while on the field, when a monster effect is activated as a quick effect, you can tribute a monster from your hand or field to negate the activation, and if you do, banish it. This is a pretty recent piece of support, and it's pretty interesting. Like Valkyris, the tributing is part of the effect, so by tributing your effect monsters, you get to replace them. And by sending ritual spells to the grave, you can end up searching another one. And you'll even have the fuel engraved to activate that effect, because you had to send Nekroz monsters in the first place. And its on-field effect is stellar. Being a monster negate that banishes is a nice touch. And it also tributes as part of the effect, and it lets you use any monster. So if you don't have any Nekroz around and just have a few spare hand traps, you aren't locked out of using the effect. It's hard to gauge how good this is for the theme, as I was never liquid enough to afford to play the theme in its heyday, but since this didn't put the theme back into competitive relevance, I feel like it's a nice tool to have in your arsenal, but doesn't really redefine the theme. Though it may have something to do with the fact that you made a Necro Cloth of a Dragoonity in a theme that's already got 3 Ice Barrier dragons in it, so I don't think you're going to get the Restless Spirit in those dragon wings to unleash its full power. Nekroz of Decisive Armor is a level 10 dragon monster with 3300 attack and 2300 defense, and must be ritual summoned without using any level 10 monsters. And during either player's turn, you can discard this card, then target a Nekroz monster you control, and it gains 1000 attack and defense until the end of this turn. And while it's on the field, you can target a set card your opponent controls, destroy it, and if you do, banish it. So not only is this basically a Kalute, it wipes out any set card and gets rid of them for good. This card is basically in the same camp as Gungnir, a one-of that could be searched when its effect was needed, but wasn't exactly acting as a headliner for the theme, though a 3300 attack body is nothing to turn your nose up at, or snout in this monster's case. Honestly, the power doesn't even come from the cannons it's wearing, it just has that much muscle from lugging around all that equipment. Nekroz of Sophia is a level 11 light spellcaster with 3600 attack and 3400 defense, and must be ritual summoned from the hand by using 3 monsters you control with different types, and can't be special summoned by other ways. During either player's main phase 1, you can discard this card and a Nekroz spell card to keep your opponent from special summoning monsters from the extra deck during this phase. And when this card is ritual summoned, you can banish all other cards on the field and in the graves, but you can't normal summon, set, or special summon other monsters the turn you activate this effect, so yeah, this card is basically unplayable. The in-hand effect has some merit. People will bend over backwards to initiate a Scythe Lock, but the difference is that Scythe Locking keeps your opponent out of the extra deck for the whole turn, not a phase. And the summoning conditions on this card are, to put it lightly, atrocious. Like, you can only use cards you control, so not only are monsters in the hand useless, you can't use Kaleidoscope, though needing 3 monsters already kinda kills that. You have to summon Sophia from the hand, so Cycle's Grave Summoning can't be used, and on top of needing those 3 monsters, of different types, they still have to exactly equal 11. And even if you are able to do that, you sure as heck better do it on a turn you haven't summoned, because then you're doing all of this for a 3600 attack vanilla. All of this leads to Nekroz of Sophia seeing 0 play, but considering that's the same for base Sophia, that makes this one of the most flavorful cards in the entire theme, so props to them? Alright, that's all the Nekroz cards, but what do we do with them? Well, the theme has a ton of control elements, so I see no reason to think they should worry about doing anything else, especially because they can pivot to game-ending plays at the drop of a hat. Sadly, the meta has shifted to having a ton more tools to deal with Nekroz, but rituals have never been in a better place than they are now, with a ton of generic support that they can leverage. So what can we play to help them out? Well, when it comes to generic ritual support, there's 2 big themes to look out for: Drytron and Incantations, and I think both have good arguments to play one over the other, because as stated in previous videos, the summon lock Drytrons put you under means you can't use them alongside Incantations. Both have generic ritual spells that can be used to ritual summon the Nekroz, Meteornus, and Inception, which gives you more ways to ritual summon outside of 3 mirrors while bypassing the exact level restriction. Meteornus even lets you ritual summon from Grave, though Inception has the potential to combo off even harder. If you plan on special summoning your non-ritual monsters, I'd recommend going the Incantation route, but they can interfere with your extra deck usages, so if not, Drytron is where it's at, especially because they can make even better use of Benten. Speaking of which, Benten or no, Manju of the 10,000 Hands is a must for this deck, acting as a way to either get a ritual monster or spell, and because of the discard effects of our monsters, its many hands give you impressive reach. Choju of the Trillion Hands was just revealed in Photon Hypernova, but being a level 6 monster, it's a bit more unwieldy. You can't just normal summon it to get the effect. However, if we get easy ways to special summon level 6 light fairies with less than 1500 attack, this card is way better, and you might find this to be a good complement to Incantations, as those tiny trinkets make for great tribute fodder for Choju. Getting rid of them turns off their extra deck lock. Preparation of Rites is also very handy, as it'll search out anything from Gungnir and below, and because you can grab Brionac with this, you can get anything above that too, while also getting you back one of your mirrors from the grave. Though because of how flexible the mirrors are, pre-preparation of Rites doesn't really work with us. You might also want to consider running them alongside Megaliths. Their core game plan is already rock solid, with the field spell giving you the ability to recycle your rituals and keep them protected from battle for a little bit. And Full can also recover your monsters, while also being able to deploy Bathor out of nowhere. And with all the Nekroz you'll be discarding, you'll be giving it a ton of targets. Not to mention the kind of OTK potential that Phaleg can get up to. Speaking of Photon Hypernova, Dynamond is a pretty nifty card to have at your disposal. It's immediate removal on summon, and during your opponent's turn you contribute this to get one of your rituals back into your hand. You can't revive them, unfortunately, but the option to buy back one of your Nekroz monsters is pretty swell. As for a silly tech pick, try Star-Crossed Meeting. It's not the best in pure Nekroz, since almost none of our levels align, but the Grave effect is where it shines, as being able to drop Trishula at a moment's notice is pretty killer. Urgent Ritual Art does an okay job of this, but you have to control no ritual monsters to activate it, which is a little counterproductive to the whole aspect of having a ritual deck. And that's all I have to say about Nekroz. While they were oppressively powerful at the time, I have to admit, in hindsight, the theme has a lot of card design that encourages strategic gameplay, for both the pilot and the opponent. The cards are very strong, but have small weaknesses that can be played around. Trishula requiring a card in each zone can technically be worked around, and the Valkyrus battle phase stopper can be thwarted by hitting yourself with Book of Moon. And while the Jin lock was thankfully nixed because that was obnoxious, I can see why people had a lot of nostalgia for the format. It was a pleasure getting to revisit these Necro Warriors, and was a big reminder that Burning Abyss still won North American Nationals that year. That's right, you can be the best deck in the format and still fold the Farfa targeting Clausulus. Let's go! But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Nekroz a thing in the ice waiting to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting meta, or have they cooled off? And if you've watched this long, secret mission, what's your favorite Nekroz? I want to see which of these synchro fanatics has your heart. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and like to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander Harry, the ominous benefactor, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Avi Chali, Kane Senpai, Cameron Berg, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Ironic, John Manji, Julia Sneezer, Larakia, Mana Charge, Marluxia's Girl, Meteornus, Michael Madsen, Mighty Action X, Muzuki Clark, Neo Trinity, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Rem T. Bright, RJ the Jank Monarch, Ruxith Sarani, Sophie, apparently, the Fresh Prince of Conair, the Wizard Moose, True Neutral, Xander Wolfensberger and Xyrus, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Chris Kessler, Emily, Eva Padilla, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Jesus Garcia, KL, Kale the Dragon, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-de-Doo, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, Sarah Loslushi, Shaquille Solomon, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Tucker Ordogne and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you'd like to see another video about some awesome ritual monsters, check out this video I did covering Vendreads. And if you want to see two Yu-Gi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series, Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.